I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd fall for someone in a situation like that. You know, when you're stuck somewhere unexpected, when circumstances force you together with a stranger and suddenly nothing else matters except the space between you. But that's exactly what happened to me last winter, and I'm still trying to make sense of it all. My name's Marcus, and I'm a software developer for a mid-sized tech company in Seattle. I'm 28, painfully organized, the kind of guy who meal preps on Sundays and has his entire life color-coded in a digital calendar. My friends joke that I'm allergic to spontaneity, and honestly, they're not wrong. I like structure. I like knowing what's coming. So when my company announced a mandatory team-building retreat in the mountains, I wasn't thrilled, but I figured I could handle it. 2 days of trust falls and brainstorming sessions. How bad could it be? The retreat center was this rustic lodge situation about 3 hours north, nestled in the Cascades. Picture rough-hewn timber beams, a massive stone fireplace, and the kind of aggressively wholesome atmosphere that makes you want to check your phone every 5 minutes just to feel connected to civilization. We arrived on a Friday afternoon in early February, and the weather forecast had mentioned possible snow, but nothing serious. Just a dusting, they said. The kind of thing that makes everything look picturesque in photos. I should mention that I'd been single for about a year at that point. My last relationship had ended badly, one of those slow-motion disasters where you both know it's over months before anyone says anything. James had been my college boyfriend, and we'd tried to make it work for 5 years after graduation, but we'd grown into different people. He wanted adventure, spontaneity, travel. I wanted stability, routine, a mortgage. When he finally moved out, I felt relieved more than heartbroken, which probably told me everything I needed to know. Since then, I'd been on a handful of dates that went nowhere. The apps felt like a second job, and I was starting to wonder if maybe I was just meant to be alone. Not in a sad way necessarily, just in a practical way. Some people are built for partnership, and some people are built for other things. I was starting to accept that I might be in the second category. The retreat started innocuously enough. We did icebreakers in the main hall, divided into teams for some kind of scavenger hunt situation that I immediately forgot about because I was too busy checking my work email. My boss, Patricia, kept shooting me disapproving looks, but I couldn't help it. We had a product launch coming up, and I had code to review. That's when I first noticed Soren. He worked in the design department, which meant our paths rarely crossed at the office. He was one of those people who seemed to exist in a completely different universe than mine. Creatively minded where I was analytical, spontaneous where I was planned. I'd seen him around, of course. You couldn't really miss him. He had this presence about him, tall and lean with dark hair that was always slightly disheveled, like he'd just rolled out of bed or run his hands through it too many times. He wore vintage band t-shirts under blazers and somehow made it look intentional rather than confused. We ended up on the same scavenger hunt team through some random selection process, and I remember thinking it was going to be awkward. He seemed like the kind of person who'd want to actually try, who'd get invested in winning a meaningless corporate competition. But when we were sent off into the woods with our list of items to find, he just laughed and said, "Want to fake it? I saw a coffee shop in town." I liked him immediately. We didn't go to the coffee shop. Patricia was watching too closely for that. But we did half-ass the scavenger hunt pretty spectacularly, spending most of the time talking about how much we both hated team-building exercises. He told me about his previous job at an advertising agency where they'd had to do a ropes course, and he'd gotten stuck halfway up a climbing wall, frozen with fear while his entire team watched from below. I told him about a trust fall exercise where my partner had been checking their phone and I'd actually hit the ground. "I caught you, though," a voice said behind us. It was Jeremy from accounting, who apparently had been my partner that day and had absolutely not caught me. We all laughed, and the afternoon passed more easily than I'd expected. That evening, after a dinner of surprisingly decent lasagna and a truly excruciating PowerPoint presentation about synergy, we all headed to our assigned rooms. That's when things got complicated. The retreat center had overbooked. Apparently, another company had reserved rooms for the same weekend, and there'd been some kind of administrative mix-up. The staff was apologetic, but firm. Some of us would have to share rooms, and not just rooms, but bunk beds, because they were pulling out every available sleeping space in the facility. I stood in the lobby with my small overnight bag, watching Patricia negotiate with the manager, and felt a familiar anxiety creeping up my spine. I didn't do well with disruptions to plans. I'd mentally prepared for a small single room where I could decompress after forced socialization. The idea of sharing space with a coworker, of having to maintain the professional facade even while sleeping, made my chest tight. "Looks like we're bunkmates." Soren appeared next to me, holding a crumpled piece of paper with a room number on it. "Unless you got assigned somewhere else?" I checked my paper. Same number. "Guess so," I said, trying to sound casual about it. The room was small, barely big enough for the bunk bed, a narrow dresser, and about 2 feet of floor space. A single window looked out onto the darkening forest. The heating situation was apparently controlled centrally, and someone had decided that February in the mountains called for a balmy 72 degrees inside, which meant the room felt stuffy and warm. "I'll take the top bunk," Soren offered, tossing his bag onto the upper mattress. "I'm weirdly not claustrophobic about sleeping in small elevated spaces." "That's a very specific thing to not be claustrophobic about," I said. "I contain multitudes." He grinned, and I found myself smiling back despite my discomfort with the situation. We got ready for bed in awkward shifts, taking turns in the tiny bathroom down the hall. I'd brought proper pajamas, flannel pants, and a t-shirt, because even in my most casual moments, I couldn't quite commit to sleeping in just boxers around coworkers. When I came back from brushing my teeth, Soren was already in the top bunk, reading something on his phone, wearing a gray hoodie and sweatpants. I climbed into the lower bunk and lay there in the darkness after we'd said goodnight, and he'd turned off the light, listening to the old building settle around us. I could hear other people in nearby rooms, muffled conversations and laughter. Above me, Soren shifted, and the whole bunk frame creaked. "Sorry," he whispered. "These things are not built for movement." "It's fine," I whispered back. I thought I'd have trouble sleeping, but exhaustion from the day caught up with me, and I drifted off within minutes. I woke up freezing. At first, I thought I was dreaming. That sensation of cold that sometimes creeps into your sleep and manifests as strange scenarios. But no, I was definitely awake, and I was definitely cold. The kind of cold that gets into your bones, that makes your muscles tense up involuntarily. I pulled my thin blanket tighter around myself, but it didn't help. The blanket they'd provided was decorative at best, some kind of cotton weave that looked nice but provided approximately zero insulation. I checked my phone. 3 in the morning. The room felt like a refrigerator. Above me, I heard Soren shift again. "Marcus?" His voice was quiet, careful not to wake me if I was sleeping. "You awake?" "Yeah," I managed through chattering teeth. "It's freezing. The heat must have cut out." He was quiet for a moment. "I can feel you shivering. The whole bunk is shaking." I felt embarrassed, like my body's involuntary response to cold was somehow an imposition. "Sorry, I'll try to stay still." "That's not what I meant." Another pause. "Hang on." I heard him moving above me, the rustle of fabric, and then he was climbing down the bunk ladder. In the faint moonlight coming through the window, I could see him standing there, holding what looked like a thick comforter. "I grabbed the extra blanket from the closet earlier," he said. "Figured these thin ones wouldn't cut it. Didn't realize I'd be right." He moved toward my bunk, and I instinctively shifted over to make room, though I wasn't sure what he was planning. Then he did something I didn't expect. He spread the thick comforter over me, tucking it around the edges of the narrow mattress, and then, without asking, without hesitating, he climbed into the bunk next to me. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice very close now in the darkness. I just thought, body heat. Basic survival stuff. My heart was hammering, and not from the cold anymore. "Yeah," I heard myself say. "Yeah, that's okay." The bunk was not designed for 2 adult men. We were pressed together by necessity, his chest against my back, his arm draping over me to help hold the blanket in place. I could feel his breath on the back of my neck, warm against my cold skin. He smelled like whatever laundry detergent he used, something clean and slightly cedar-scented, and underneath that, just him. "You're really cold," he murmured, and his arm tightened slightly, pulling me closer against him. I should have said something casual, something that would have kept this in the realm of practical problem-solving. 2 coworkers dealing with a heating emergency. Instead, I just let myself relax into his warmth, feeling my muscles gradually unclench as heat spread through me. "Better?" he asked after a few minutes. "Much better," I whispered. We lay there in silence, and I became hyper-aware of every point of contact between us. His knee tucked behind mine, his hand, which had somehow ended up resting on my chest, right over my heart, which was still beating too fast, the way our breathing gradually synchronized. I hadn't been this close to another person in over a year. Since James left, I'd been almost aggressively independent, proud of my ability to function alone, to not need anyone. But lying there in the dark with Soren's warmth surrounding me, I felt something crack open inside my chest, some defensive wall I'd built without realizing it. "Marcus?" His voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "Yeah? I need to tell you something." He paused, and I felt his chest expand against my back as he took a deep breath. "I've noticed you. At work, I've wanted to talk to you for months, but you always seem so focused, so in your own world. I thought you probably wouldn't be interested in someone like me." My breath caught. "Someone like you? You know, disorganized, impulsive. The kind of person who shows up to meetings with paint under their fingernails because I forgot I was working on a canvas the night before." He laughed softly, self-deprecating. "You're so put together, Marcus. You have your life figured out, and I'm still trying to remember to buy groceries before the fridge is completely empty." I turned over carefully in the narrow space, so we were facing each other. In the moonlight, I could see his eyes, dark and uncertain. "I don't have my life figured out," I said. "I just pretend really well. And honestly, the put-together thing is exhausting. It's like I'm constantly holding myself rigid, trying to maintain control over everything, because if I let go even a little, everything might fall apart." His hand came up to my face, fingers tracing the line of my jaw. What if it doesn't fall apart? What if letting go is actually what holds things together? I didn't have an answer for that. Instead, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of us testing this new territory, but then his hand slid into my hair, and mine found his waist under his hoodie, and the kiss deepened into something urgent and necessary. We kissed like people who'd been waiting for this without knowing it, like we were trying to make up for months of missed opportunities. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since the scavenger hunt," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" "Because you seemed so closed off, like you had walls up that I couldn't figure out how to get past." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. "And I wasn't sure if you were even interested in guys." "I'm definitely interested in guys," I said. "Just one specific guy, apparently." We kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. His body was warm against mine, solid and real, and I felt something in me unfurl, some tightly wound spring finally releasing. We didn't go further than kissing that night. It felt like enough, like more than enough, to lie there in each other's arms as the hours passed, whispering in the darkness about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in Portland, about how he'd always been the weird art kid, how he'd come out in high school and been surprisingly accepted by everyone except his father, who still couldn't quite look him in the eye during family dinners. I told him about my relationship with James, about how I'd convinced myself that wanting stability made me boring, that maybe I was just fundamentally uninteresting. "You're not boring," Soren said fiercely. "You're careful. There's a difference. And honestly, Marcus, I could use some of that in my life. Someone who remembers to pay bills on time and doesn't lose their keys twice a week." "I could probably use some of your spontaneity," I admitted. "I've been so rigid lately. Like if I don't control everything, something bad will happen." "What if we balance each other out?" He kissed my forehead. "What if that's the point?" When we finally fell asleep, tangled together under the thick comforter, I slept better than I had in months. Morning came too soon, pale winter light filtering through the window. I woke up first, and for a moment I just watched Soren sleep, his face relaxed and peaceful, dark lashes against his cheeks. In the daylight, with the reality of work and professional boundaries reasserting themselves, I felt a flutter of anxiety. What happened now? Did we pretend this hadn't happened? Did we try to navigate dating while working at the same company? His eyes opened, and he smiled immediately upon seeing me. "Morning." "Morning," I said back, and just like that, the anxiety eased. Whatever this was, we'd figure it out. The heat had come back on sometime during the night, and the room was warm again, almost too warm. We got ready for the day in that same awkward shuffle as the night before, but now there was an added charge to it, an awareness of each other that made even mundane actions feel significant. At breakfast we sat together, and I could feel people noticing the slight shift in social dynamics. Jeremy from accounting raised an eyebrow at me across the table, but I just shrugged. Let them wonder. The second day of the retreat was somehow more bearable than the first. We did more team-building exercises, more trust falls and problem-solving scenarios, but now I had Soren next to me, making quiet jokes that made me bite back laughter at inappropriate moments. Patricia definitely noticed, and at one point, she pulled me aside. "You seem different today," she said, studying my face. "More relaxed." "Just getting into the spirit of team building," I said, trying to keep my expression neutral. She smiled knowingly. "Sure, Marcus, whatever you say." That evening, after we'd all packed up and were loading into cars for the drive back to Seattle, Soren caught my arm. "So," he said, looking uncharacteristically nervous, "I was thinking, maybe we could get dinner sometime, like an actual date?" "I'd like that," I said, and meant it completely. We exchanged numbers, made plans for the following weekend, and then I drove home alone, my mind full of the feel of his arms around me, the taste of his kiss, the way he'd looked at me in the moonlight like I was something worth figuring out. That was 3 months ago now. We've been dating officially for most of that time, though we kept it quiet at work for the first month until we were sure this was real, that it wasn't just some weird retreat-induced proximity thing. Turns out, it was very real. Soren has a drawer at my apartment now, full of his vintage t-shirts and paint-stained jeans. My bathroom counter has his toiletries next to mine. He's teaching me to be more spontaneous, to say yes to last-minute plans, to not freak out when things don't go exactly as scheduled. I'm teaching him about meal prep and the satisfaction of a well-organized closet, though I'm pretty sure he's humoring me on that last one. Last week, he stayed over on a Tuesday night, which felt wildly rebellious for me, having someone sleep over on a weeknight. We were lying in my bed, in my actual comfortable bed with its memory foam mattress and high thread count sheets, so different from that narrow bunk, and he turned to me. "I'm glad the heat broke that night," he said. "Yeah?" I traced patterns on his chest with my fingertips. "Yeah. I'd been trying to work up the courage to talk to you for months. Probably would have taken me another 6 months to actually do it. The universe forced my hand." "The universe and a faulty heating system," I said. He laughed and pulled me closer. "I love you, you know. Your color-coded calendar and your meal prep Sundays and the way you always have backup plans for your backup plans." My breath caught. We hadn't said that yet, hadn't crossed that particular threshold. "I love you too," I said, and felt the truth of it settle into my bones. Your chaos and your paint-stained everything and the way you make me feel like maybe I don't have to have it all figured out. "We'll figure it out together," he said, and kissed me. So that's my story. That's how I fell for my bunkmate during a corporate retreat, how a broken heating system and a shared blanket changed everything. People at work know about us now, and mostly they're cool about it. Jeremy from accounting claims he knew all along, which is absolutely not true. But whatever. I'm different now than I was 3 months ago. I still like structure and plans, still color-code my calendar and meal prep on Sundays. But now there's room for spontaneity too, for last-minute decisions and imperfect moments. Soren leaves his shoes in the middle of my living room, and instead of immediately putting them away, I sometimes leave them there for a whole day, just to prove to myself that I can. And sometimes, on cold nights, even though my apartment has perfectly functional heating, Soren will pull me close and say he can feel me shivering, and we'll burrow under the blankets together. And I'll remember that night in the mountains when everything changed, when I learned that sometimes the best things happen when your carefully constructed plans fall apart, when you let someone past your walls, when you stop trying to control everything and just let yourself feel. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd fall for someone in a situation like that, but I did. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Total char count, 24,847.